go. We're live. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome this evening, this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are in the world, to another episode of HeartMind Happy Hour. I am your host, Holly Copeland, and I am very excited to welcome Tyson Sapre to the show today. Welcome, Tyson.
Hello.
I am super excited about today's show. Tyson is a frequent contributor on our beautiful community that's growing leaps and bounds. It's amazing how many people are posting and sharing, and we're getting really nice comments from people too about how kind and caring the community is, and that just warms my heart because that was the intent when Stephen Altair and I founded this with Randy. It was to bring a really open and welcoming community for biohackers to share data, have people give feedback, and just more than anything feel that all the comments were kind and conscientious and supportive. And I feel like that's what this community is about, and it's awesome. So it's the community that's making it that way. It's all of you, and I'm really, really appreciative for that. And I know other people are too.
Thank you, for putting it all together. I know it's a lot of work, and you guys are just doing a great job. Just all the information that you guys put out it's amazing. So it's just really been great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm really excited about Tyson being on the show in particular because so many people are dealing with kinds of issues that he's going to talk about that he tackled in his own biohacking adventures. So things like, sleep issues and stress and depression, anxiety, really common things that a lot of people are feeling right now. And the whole spirit of biohacking is really taking charge of your own health, taking it into your own hands, and self-improvement. And this world of, biohacking is so big, and there's so many different approaches and things you can do. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel like you're getting lost when you're trying to take care of, you're trying to explore this realm. And Tyson was one of those people who was having those issues, and he was an actor in Los Angeles. He was feeling pretty stressed out, and decided to take charge of his own health and really try to learn about biohacking, and specifically about biofeedback technology. So he's got a lot of expertise in HRV, and then transauricular nerve stimulation. So I'm going to let him talk about that. He showed me this amazing device that he built, and when he showed it to me, I was like, oh, that's just way too cool. So you've got to come on the show and talk about it, talk about what led you to develop it, what it's done for you, and then share some of his expertise specifically on biofeedback that he's done. So that's what we're going to cover today. We may even let him give some demos. I'm just really excited. So yeah, thanks again, Tyson, for making time to be on the show, and would love to really hear, to just hear a little bit about your story and how you built this incredible device. You'll have to show it when you're ready.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so like you said, I was in, Los Angeles, and trying to get into acting, and I was in a rough kind of spot when I got there, health-wise, because in a very stressful job working in IT, actually for a public health institution for Johns Hopkins, and actually went into Johns Hopkins during H1N1, and the job was like, can you please record all our lectures in case the world has to shut down, so it was just really busy and really stressful. Good job, good people, but over time, I started having sleep issues, and specifically like sleep phase, like delay. Like I've always been a night owl, and when I had to shift to like an early schedule, it was just very, very difficult. And I was always wanting to do film and stuff like that. That was sort of why I was doing media, working in media for them and IT. So I got to a point where, I just had to leave. I just had to sort of take the shot. So got to LA, and it was great. I was in rough shape, so I got like a lot of nice roles as like, homeless person, or like a mobster or something like that, just all the ugliest possible roles you could have. I fit right in. But it was fun, and I met, a ton of people. But it was really stressful. Hollywood's super stressful. It's a big hustle. If you're not into city life, LA is probably one of the worst cities to live in if you're not a city person. So, I was already having like issues with depression and things like that before I got there, and they just weren't getting any better. My health was getting worse. I was gaining a lot of weight. A couple times I was getting like in this sort of pre-diabetic. Like it was really getting to the point where I just had to stop. So, I had some really supportive family. I was able to come back to Maryland and really kind of get things under control. When I came back, I started a screenwriting program, so I was like in the middle of that, and that was just awful. Like that sort of made things. I mean, the program was good, but grad school is like if you're already having health issues and you're in grad school, like things are just things are just going to get even harder. So, but thankfully I was able to finish, and then once I finished, I was like just really motivated to get back into, to get healthy again. I was like 305 pounds, just tired all the time, just really in rough shape. And so I went to like a program, it was like a local gym, and when I went in, actually, my depression had gotten to the point where I had tried probably a dozen different medications. I think I was probably on about 5 different ones when I'd gotten back home.
Wow.
And I had done a pretty heavy round of because I know folks in this group are familiar with stimulation and things like that. So I did a round of transcranial magnetic stimulation, where they put the big coil by your head and just, it doesn't ever touch your head, but it feels like a bird like tapping on your skull. And that was pretty helpful. So, after that, I went to the gym, and actually the guy who gave me the orientation was in the middle of a course of it too. And he had been dealing with depression too. And he's like, exercise kind of saved my life, kind of
Yeah.
really turned things around for me. And he showed me a bunch of stuff, and just sort of sent me on my way. And at first the big thing was like, was managing calories and all that stuff. And so I wanted to track, I guess got into tracking like right off the biohacking side of tracking, like right out of the gate. So I went to Walmart, got the Garmin, started tracking my steps, and I saw that the Garmin was doing all this stuff like stress and heart rate. And so when I would work out, I would try to get a good estimate of how many calories I was burning. But what I noticed was on the machines that actually had heart rate, it was way different than what I was getting on the Garmin. And to Garmin's credit, they make no bones about the fact that that's going to happen unless you're doing very specific things like walking or running. But I wanted to do these other things, and I was super frustrated because the stuff I was doing, I really liked doing. It was like low impact, like elliptical, things like that. And I would just go and just spend an hour or two and just kind of tune out, put my music on, and just really kind of de-stress. But I wasn't getting good tracking. So I got a chest strap, and then finally I was getting good heart rate data and knew how many calories I was burning. And then just figured out, oh, there's all this other stuff you can do with that. Like you can track HRV. And I was like, well, what's that? So as soon as I found out about that, I got really into it. Started with Weltori, started tracking, like, I think it'll be 2 years in late February, more or less every day. And then from HRV, then I found out I could also do biofeedback. So I found out, about iThrive was a big one. It took me a while to get into iThrive because the first, when I first looked into it, I saw all the information, like all of Dan Winter's graphs and charts and Patrick's lectures online. And I was like, wow. I was like, at some point, I'm really going to get into this stuff, but it's probably going to be a while, you know. But you know, so slowly I kind of got into that, and I really loved it, and I couldn't understand why. Um, but you know, my father, just some backstory. My father was from India. He passed away when I was younger, but he taught me. You know, I was raised. You know, I'm half Caucasian and half Indian. We were raised Methodist. Um, when I was really young, he taught me like pranayam when I was like 3 years old. And he's like, well, you need a mantra, but I didn't understand any Hindi. And he only taught me like a few different words. He's like, we need something for you. So he's like, just use the Lord's Prayer. Just, you know, count it out in and count it out. Just sort of say it to yourself as you do the breath work. Um, so it's ever since I was 3, you know, I sort of knew about this. And finally, like, I made the connection after doing biofeedback for several months, you know, seeing, like, learning about Elmer Green and watching his documentary and seeing him, you know, go off to India. And I mean, he had like, he'd be like in the mountains, like, and have like EEG and hooked up to all these like skinny yogis, like sitting on beds of nails, like, and he was tracking everything and trying to get all this data, and you know, just like tracking them, stopping their heart and doing all this stuff. So at that point, it really clicked. I was like, you know, that's basically why I'm interested in this. It's like, it's going back way farther than I really understood, that this is like basically like, you know, this is like computer yoga, you know. So it's like, here I am with this IT background. I've always been interested in that stuff, and now we've actually got, you know, things from my roots. So it all sort of came together there. And as I was reading more and more, I kept hearing this thing about, you know, TAVNS. What is that? Like, what is vagus nerve stimulation? What even is the vagus nerve? But apparently that's considered like, you know, why HRV biofeedback works, why the breath work helps certain conditions like asthma, or, you know, anxiety, because apparently like people with anxiety and asthma, they tend to overbreathe, but also have low like relaxation. So, you know, I really got into all that stuff. And as I got in better shape and got healthier, I got back into martial arts. I was very, you know, I was very passionate about that. But I'm 41, you know, I was like about to be 42, and I was 40 when I got back into martial arts. And I probably got more injuries like in that first year than I had in like the previous 10. So I was always looking for things to like kind of recover and just kind of get my body back in shape. And I ended up just for yucks, like ordering this little muscle stimulator, and it's got like 10 settings. But then I just sort of realized, oh, I could probably do the ear stimulation with this thing. But I just want to make it clear that I didn't just try it, you know, like I looked it up. I looked up the specs. I looked up some of the professional devices and compared. You know, I ran it by my doctor. Like I just want to make sure everyone knows that it wasn't just like, hey, let me stick this electrode in my ear and just see what happens. You know, that that wasn't.
Or you could.
Yeah, you could just do that. I mean, I figured, you know, it's from China. It's probably safe, right? You know,
Probably fine.
you know, this chart, so why not, you know?
Yeah, yeah, you don't need any more. I love it.
Proof. This is the proof here.
What, I mean, what exactly could happen?
Um, so
Uh,
I used this, and it definitely seemed like it worked. Just right in this area here.
yeah, yep. And when you say it worked, what did you notice?
I noticed that it helped me kind of like calm down, or helped me fall asleep, or I, you know, slept a little bit better. Um, it wasn't like anything, you know, crazy. And at times it felt like it worked, and at times it felt like maybe it didn't work.
Yeah.
Um, but I started to think like, well, maybe this is kind of silly. Maybe there isn't much to it. but then I started to read a little bit more about it. And what really convinced me actually was like tracking resting HRV while I was doing it. And I did a test, you know, with a
Mm-hmm.
few out, and then I turned the thing on.
Good.
And then I looked,
Before after tests, or they're
yeah,
very valuable. Yeah.
yeah. And you know, there's in HRV, there's like a couple different things. There's like the time domain, and then there's like when you take the signals and split them out into their little components, the frequency domain, like light through, you know, like a, what do you call it? Like a, where it splits out into a rainbow or
A
whatever.
prism.
Prism, light through a prism kind of a thing. Yeah. That's an analogy that gets used a lot. So when I looked at that part of it, when I looked at like the components, then I saw that the area that's typically more associated with the relaxation response,
Mm-hmm.
uh, HRV, there was all kinds of stuff going on there, you know,
Wow.
and I couldn't necessarily feel it. Um, but when I saw that, it was so dramatic that I was like, well, maybe there's something to this. So I just thought, why don't I just try to make a headset and keep doing it rather than just like sit here like this, you know. Oh, it's got to be the left ear, by the way. They say that's safer. They say
Okay.
I have to do the right ear.
Okay. Okay.
Not that the risk is super high, but you know, there's some like if you have any kind of epilepsy or anything like that, this is any implanted devices,
Mm-hmm.
pacemakers, whatever. This is totally a no-go. Don't do this,
Yeah.
right? So
And just for the record, Heart Mind Alchemy isn't in, we don't endorse anything per se. This is just a conversation for, to inform you, but no warranty is implied, expressed, or included in this conversation or anything we talk about.
yeah,
Yeah.
so basically I just sort of wired up an old pair of headphones. Um, so you can see here's the device on top, and it comes with all kinds of like different, this thing comes with all kinds of different like attachments, you know. One's like a roller, one's like a scraper. So I use the two. I use sort of the ball part here and this flat part. So the flat part kind of sits right in here, and this one, because they say that the vagus nerve, they call it the auricular branch of the vagus nerve, innervates the inner ear and into the ear canal. So according to like all the research and charts. So to hit it properly, you want to get it like right in that flat
Mm-hmm.
little part there. The ear canal works too. This little nub also works if you have like a clip, supposedly that's pretty good. And so the instead of like, because with this you complete the current. So the current is running through your hand into the ear. So I figured why not just complete the current all at the ear. And this part sort of hits right up there, which is actually like in acupuncture is the Shen Men point, and that has something to do with the heart. And it's interesting because you know how they say like the body is a hologram, that there's kind of like you can access any part of it from any other part, sort of a thing. There's some, not like you wouldn't hear like a Western doctor tell you that, but
No, but and also that the entire universe and instructions for the entire universe are contained in the body as well. Like I've heard that
yeah, yeah.
um,
Um,
recently. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like this spot here is like one of those intersections where like the Western physiology and the Eastern, you know, medicine
Mhm.
philosophy intersect, you know, pretty well. And you know, they say the vagus nerve goes to branches out to all the internal organs.
Mhm.
So from that perspective, you are hitting a lot of stuff throughout the body just from this one point. I mean, they're still doing research on it, but they've mapped sort of the way the where the nerves go and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And it's considered actually brain stimulation. Um, and they do implants for, depression. They see that it does has a lot of anti-inflammatory effects and things like that. So I just sort of kept using it off and on. Haven't had any side effects necessarily that have been problematic. And I've been checked out, again, this is not an endorsement, but I've been checked out like pretty thoroughly. Because back in summertime, I had like heat exhaustion like 2 or 3 times in a row. Like the first one was the worst. I didn't have to go to the hospital, but I was really close. And after that, I started having kind of not major heart issues, but like heart palpitations, things like that. And to be honest, I probably should have used this thing more.
Mm.
But I kind of got lazy about it. But I've had lots of checkups like EKGs, 24-hour Holter monitors, echocardiograms, things like that. And they're like, yeah, they're basically saying I'm a big baby, nothing's wrong. So.
And how do you feel? I mean, when you compare your state of health now to how it was when you left Hollywood?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's memories it's hard to let go of feeling crappy, if you've ever had health issues, it's tough to let go of that stuff. So all that stuff's still kind of there, to some degree, but if I can let go of those things, I'd have to say, there's times when it's just it feels, pretty amazing. Just exercising or, being out, like I can just do things that I never thought I'd be able to do. And I don't know if it's due to this or biofeedback or exercise or just all, the community now that we have, like just all this stuff. It's hard to say, what's responsible for what, but I mean, I'm just sort of like in a totally different place,
Right. That sounds like it. It sounds like you have shifted. You really shifted into a different place. And I'm geeking out right now. My current geek out is on the biofield and learning about biofield tuning. And she's talking a lot about, how right in our field, we store memories from every single event. Every thought, feeling, emotion is stored in your biofield. So there could be some, part of that, I think, to my own health issues of, cleaning the biofield at that level could maybe help to clear some of those imprints that still feel residual. They like feel like they're there. I think I know what you're talking about. It's like you're healthy, but you have this memory that your consciousness is aware of. And at some point that working at that level probably would be really the next step maybe for you to take.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All these little triggers, they could just be like feeling that have nothing to do with anything. Like I'll wake up one morning and feel tired and just be like, oh, here we go again, like,
Yeah.
But really it's got nothing to do with anything. It's not, it's just
Right.
feeling. So.
And that's where I too think that meditation and working at the meditative level can be really helpful, because then you start to work with when those emotions arise, kind of letting them go and learning how to work with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, that's all. I think I'm ready for all that. I think, because I was so physically unhealthy, when I got back, I went to a few psychologists here and some who were like really well known, and they're like, you're just not, they're straight up about it. They're like, you're just not in a place physically to be able to do any of this, like to do any of this work, yeah, it was kind of strange because they're like, this, you have to exert a lot of effort. And but they still, some, one was very kind, like worked with me anyway, but I sort of see what they're saying now. Like it does take a lot of energy to do psychological work, like to shift your perspective. We don't, I mean, you don't think of it as like a physical thing, but from having studied exercise, and being a personal trainer now, a lot of what they talk about is the fatigue. The fatigue we experience can last a lot longer after our bodies recover. So it's all kind of intertwined. It's hard to separate the two, I think.
I
And
don't
so,
think there is separation. I think just like you're saying, I think they're absolutely all connected. And the body, the physical symptoms are actually the last thing to manifest in your body. So you've got emotional and things going on in your field, and the physical symptoms are like the last piece that locks into place. So then unlocking them is this gradual process, just like I think you're talking about unlocking, the physical and then working your way outward. But your story is totally incredible. I mean, I'm blown away by, and feel just incredible compassion for what you went through, for the hardship, and then how you turned it around yourself and worked through it. It's a really incredible story, and I really appreciate you coming on and telling it, because I think that people, when they hear, stories from real people who really decided to turn things around for themselves, and yeah, I'm sure there are bumps in the road and you're like, oh, is this going to work? I'm not sure. Is it working? But it's really a courageous and beautiful story. So thank you for sharing it.
yeah, well, thanks for giving me the opportunity and the forum to share. I mean, this isn't like the kind of thing where, you just sit down with the casually talk about, right? It's
Right.
like stories that there's no outlet for a lot of this stuff. It's not like casual Zoom conversation conversation.
Not necessarily, but what could be more important? Like, this is the real stuff. Like, to me, this is when you wake up in the morning and you're you, and whoever is watching, and that's like and you're just maneuvering through your day. You're just dancing through life, and or falling or tripping or falling in a giant hole and trying to climb your way back out. And those are hard things, and they're very, very real. And hearing people's real stories and how they coped and how they turned things around is, I think, what people, that's real information. That's what people need to hear, not some media created, fabricated, glossy story, but real stories. Yeah, so that's really
Yeah,
cool.
and I don't want to like. It's not like this. It's still challenge. There's still challenges. There's always challenges. But I think at least I feel like myself. I feel like hopefully just about everyone can get to a place where they can at least value what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's just not. It doesn't feel like just wasting time. That is, if it's a challenge and you value it, then I think that's a really great thing. That can be really helpful because I'm still dealing with sleep stuff. But I mean, and the other thing I think that I've noticed is, they say like based on like evolutionary theory that we're kind of wired to be lazy. We're wired to kind of conserve energy. And what I kind of have to where I kind of have to catch myself is always getting these places where my mind is telling me I can't go any further or I can't do any better based on where I've been. It's like it kind of pulls out this yardstick and it's like, wow, you can do this compared to that. Couldn't possibly do any better than this. But I don't, that's just not, again, that's not true. That's not, I think you can constantly keep going.
Yeah. Well, right, the mind wants to create a story, and but just like you just so beautifully said, and you figured it out yourself, like, oh, that's not true. That's not a true story. So and this journey on the meditative path is really understanding who we are, which is not the story, right? It's not the mind created story of I'm not good enough or I can't do better, or right. We're so much more than that story. We're you know and yeah. And so seeing through, I'm about to publish an article with Stephen Altair on this, seeing through the illusion of the mind created story and letting go and dropping that, and into the shining, radiant, healthy being that we truly are, and is To me, that's the true, that's what meditation and that journey within is really about.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that self-discovery path.
It's kind of scary a little bit. You maybe think you're going to lose some sense of yourself or becoming irrecognizable or, start doing all these weird things and people are going to be like, what's wrong with you? But it's like you sort of, it seems like you kind of, that doesn't happen. Like there's all this fear, but you're still you, even if, even though you're sort of changing, you know.
Right?
Yeah, does that make sense? It's like, because it feels like sometimes where I am now feels crazy compared to where I was. Like I'm in my room zapping my ear with this thing. I never would. There's not even an idea in my head a year ago. That this
Yeah.
was even. And so and then again, it's not something that would come up over coffee. Hey, oh, by the way, did I tell you that I'm zapping my vagus nerve in my left ear canal? It's been pretty cool. It's um, but yeah, it's like, but it doesn't change really if you're finding like your true self, like you're saying through meditation or pursuing your interests. It doesn't. You're still you. And you're more you probably than you were when you started on the journey to some extent.
Right. So then that gets the question of what is you, right? Who are you? And but no, it makes absolute perfect sense because awareness that's here, that is the true you that you really are, is always present, just like you said. Like whether you were doing the biohacky thing before then, it hasn't changed. But what has changed is you uncover the veils to that, right? The thing that is standing in the way of that, which is your identified self. And so you're like an onion, you're peeling those layers away to reveal the awareness that you always are. And so you're actually moving towards yourself by this in this process.
Yeah.
You're moving towards yourself of the self that's actually always been here and never left you. But
Oh, well.
it's right, but it's more revealed. It's shining through all experience.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting the way you put that, because I know you've said several times where you are now, there's like less hesitation, less self-criticism, rumination. You just sort of in the flow and you just sort of do what you want to do. Does that relate to
Yeah.
sort of this sort of unveiling that, or yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It totally relates because all of that all of that rumination and self-referential thinking and forward thinking, worry about the past, is all your thoughts. It's all mind created story. And well, so what is the mind, right? Are you the mind? Are you your thoughts? Are you and so to me, the first step is to see that you're not your thoughts. You are actually not the mind created story. And meditation was really helpful because it actually on a physical level, it starts to quiet those networks. So, the default mode network, the salience networks are calming down by this conscious tapping into your breath, by this breath work, meditation. You're rewiring in your brain these physical connections, to new centers and away from that self-referential one that likes to question everything and, hey, what are you doing? This is weird. What's going to happen to you? So you start to quiet those down. And in my experience, quieting those down allowed me to then realize in a meditative state and then out of a meditative state of, oh, I'm not my thoughts. I mean, it's a little bit like, seeing the uh, actor underneath in the play. Like you see the person that's behind the actor, the character in the play, and really realizing that, oh, all along you were mistaking reality. You thought that those thoughts were real. You thought that character in a play was you, only to realize that no, there's this character underneath, there's this person underneath who has nothing to do with those thoughts. And so you can start to put that distance, then allows you to kind of call the charade, in my experience. So when my mind starts to create a story, I can just get really quiet and see like what's here now, what's actually present when we're not in story. Oh, there's just awareness, that awareness of what's happening, the awareness of experience has been here all along and never left, because we finally shut off the frickin' narrator who wanted to interfere with who you really are. So, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. You know, and this, if I can speak to, OCD, I've been diagnosed with that. It's a weird thing because, there's a lot of stereotypes about what it is based on how people end up trying to handle it. And a lot of that is rituals, repetitive things. But, at the core of it is is this uncertainty about everything. That's kind of the driver. It's like doubt and fear that you're going to lose control, or you're going to hurt someone, or you're going to hurt yourself. And so it's always like what we're sort of taught. We're taught very specifically by therapists to expose ourselves to the possibility that things are going to go terribly wrong as much as we can, as much as we can tolerate. And I think, I'm not sure exactly what happens, but it seems almost like a similar process to what you're describing, where you just run those stories through your mind and you make them as scary as you can, to the point where you just don't care about them anymore. Like they just don't, they're just noise, and they just kind of fall away. And the challenge is, which is probably where meditation is probably more helpful, is that there's always, like the mind's always going to come up with a new story. Like it's always going to come up with some other possibility as something else for you to be afraid of. And so it's weird, but it's like, there's so many different directions you can go, so many different paths you can take to try to address these things, whether it's through meditation or breath work or vagus nerve stimulation or magnetic stimulation. But it's kind of like, getting to that point where you're just you're present, like you're saying. You can just sort of accept what's happening at right in front of you, and work with what's in front of you, as opposed to just like, if we're going to use HRV references, just being like in fight or flight, just like wanting everything to be a war. So it's really interesting how that works. And it's like, for a long time, I didn't think, they call it exposure response prevention with OCD, where you're exposing yourself to your worst fears in order to like prevent the behavioral, eventually prevent like doing the behavior, whatever that behavior is. And I always thought it was silly, because I would tell myself these things like, a perfect example, like worrying about COVID, worrying about getting somebody sick, or worrying about dying. It's like, if I tell myself, I hope I get COVID and spread it around and everybody dies, I know I don't want that to happen, right? So I can't trick myself. But, I think, and maybe I'm going off on a tangent, but it seems like it still works. And I think it works because that panicky part of the brain that we're trying to quiet down, it's literal. It doesn't understand sarcasm. It doesn't understand values or intent or anything like that. It just hears what you're telling it. So it's like if I just say that, it's going to hear it and it's going to think, oh, okay, we want that to happen. It doesn't care what it is because it has no context. It doesn't know good from bad. If you think it's bad, it's going to tell you when something bad's happening because that's what it's wired to do. So I feel like if I can tell myself these things over and over again, at least that part of my brain is going to hear it and stop warning me every time it comes up. It's not perfect,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it does help her to be more present. But it's definitely a different approach. It's
Yeah.
it's like a lot scarier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the awareness-based approach, what's beautiful about it is it returns you um, back to center, so back to subject. So we acknowledge that a lot of the time when we're caught in story, it's the same as being caught in the external world. So it's like we're taking our attention out to whatever's in front of us, and we're in a very subject or object oriented world. There's me, this consciousness in here, and these things out here. And we're sort of, our whole life is spent focusing on the things out there or thoughts, which are actually objects. And so what the awareness-based approach is to return to awareness as primary, to return to center and the wholeness of the being that you already are. So to recognize that you are already whole and perfect and don't actually need to be fixed. There isn't a self-improvement project for your true self, for awareness, because it's already whole and perfect. It was never broken to begin with. And so a lot of work that I do with people is shining the light on awareness to see that you're already whole. And that wholeness fundamentally kind of does a mind flip. And then you start to see, oh, everything doesn't have to be me trying to fix something, me trying to fix something. It's actually, I am whole. And yeah, sure, there are, things come up that you deal with, they're right action that you're taking, but you're taking them from a place of wholeness, not from a place of lack. And it's fundamentally different. It's a really for me, I'm speaking for myself, that has been a profound shift and created this incredible sense of calm and well-being. Like everything is fundamentally okay. Everything will be okay. There isn't actually a me to protect because everything's okay. Yeah.
That's, how does biohacking fit into that, do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I think that um, there can be a wellness component that it's like,
I
I
mean,
can still be working on stillness of can kind of deepening my progression of the mind's stillness, like the thought created stories, or opening my consciousness to more of what's in the field and more of actually picking up on all that is actually out here in the invisible world that we can't see. And that requires greater and greater sensitivity to the field and to awareness. And so that for me personally, the meditative path, the breathing path is about actually accessing those, living from, like in my body, higher frequency states,
mm,
higher vibration, and accessing that and more and more and more, and stabilizing this awareness. So I'm living, there's always for me in this being, in this body, like stability of living from that awareness and living from this highest vibration possible. So that's how I see it fitting in.
yeah, it's what's kind of interesting with a lot of the biohacking stuff is it's like we're trying to analyze our own signals, because I've been talking about this with people a lot. It's like there's certain things with illnesses and stuff that you can't see, you can't measure. You know, it's like, especially with mental illness, people will say, you know, I've even heard like researchers, like really well-respected researchers say, well, we haven't found anything biological about this. It's all phenomenal. It's all a phenomenon. You know, it's real, but we can't explain it. Um, and so, you know, when we can't see things, when we can't sense things, we make up all kinds of stories about it. Like, come up with all kinds of prejudices. Like if so, you know, if someone was in you know, short or tall, you wouldn't, and they told you that, you wouldn't call them a liar, you know, because you can clearly see it. But with a lot of this other stuff, even though it could have genetic parts to it or whatever, you know, because we can't see it, like, yeah, again, we're just falling into that trap of only going off what we can sense.
Right.
But it's like biohacking, we are kind of figuring out how to pick up on, sort of, I want to be careful, sort of how to pick up on these things if they're there. I mean, you know, EEG, there's a whole field of experts who will say, we don't know what's wrong with the mental health field. Like, we can show you what ADHD looks like. You know, we can show you, you can't see it on an MRI, but we've looked at hundreds of thousands of EEGs and we can show you a pattern. Like, we can show you the signals. But for some reason, you know, it just hasn't, it hasn't merged with these other fields that have more of a foothold. Um, and so it seems like that's what we're doing, is we're doing it ourselves because now the technology has become open to us a little bit. And even though there's question on how good it is, or whether or not we're actually seeing anything other than noise. But over time, we can sort of look at our own signals, our own energy, because that's what it is, right? It's energy. It's fluctuations either in electricity in our heart, or electricity in our brains. And and just kind of like look for the moving targets, so to speak, or look to see what's going on. Kind of like work with that energy a little bit more objectively, I guess. I don't know, you know.
Right. Right. No, it's all energy. Yeah. And I mean, the biohacking, you know, I think what you said is it's our ability to like track and look at ourselves, right? So whether it's at lead HRV or, you know, tracking, for me, tracking Muse over time, you know, it's that sort of getting to know myself from a data point of view. I don't know about you, but I find that it's really it's really interesting to kind of watch how my body's changing. And I'm the one who knows all the details about, oh, did I have a cup of tea, or did I, you know, what various things I might have done that would affect that, and to see how it affects. And obviously these are pretty crude measurements. I mean, the body is, so much is going on that we're not, I mean, like, we're just like touching the tiniest little surface. It's like we're taking the temperature on a really, really complicated, you know, organism. So I think we have to be mindful of that. But with this tracking, for me at least, I'd be curious for you, it's just clarity and some insights on how things, what's affecting what, that can be useful. And so I know, like HRV, you're tracking with Elite HRV and Well Tori. I'd love to hear a little bit about what you've learned doing that and what you feel like the value is.
Yeah, I just like to collect the data. It's complicated. You know, I use HRV for training and I use Weltori. HRV for training I use every day because I try to set like exercise goals for myself. I don't follow like a routine
Mhm.
or like a training schedule, but I try to get a certain amount of hours in every week. So I use HRV training, and that syncs with like something called Training Peaks, which is what a lot of serious and like triathletes will use. It's just a different way to look at how my energy expenditure is showing up in how it's affecting my heart. But the thing is, it's hard to say because you know, the way they're interpreting these things is changing. So something might look low or something might be getting lower, but doesn't necessarily mean that something's necessarily getting worse. Um, and there's fluctuations when we went into lockdown, for some reason everything shot up. I think I was just maybe at a point where I just needed a break, and unfortunately it's a terrible way to get a break, but yeah, things really shot up, and I think really I'm personally I'm kind of like at a point where I feel like I should trust. I've done it enough. I think I can trust the HRV, but what I'm still struggling with is like not getting enough, like worrying about that weight coming back. So trying to stay ahead of it and maybe overdoing it and trying to keep these numbers, at a certain level. But yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot to gain from following HRV. It's like um, it still requires trust, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you say everything shot up, do you mean that your HRV statistics got better or worse? I just want to clarify.
it got better.
So
Yeah,
you were on paper from a performance level doing much better. Is that what you're saying during lockdown? And you feel like that was because not you weren't as stressed. You were just kind of able to relax more and just kind of be a little bit on retreat. Was it that for you?
I think so. I think work stress is, for me, just like everybody else, such a big thing that getting, it doesn't matter what the job is. I can't blame the job, honestly. It doesn't matter what really.
Yeah.
And but for some reason, it sort of builds up in a way that's it's hard over time. It's a tough thing to kind of to manage.
Right.
That's always been one of my biggest challenges is preventing work stress from taking over everything else.
Right. Yeah, totally. I was just talking to a client about this week that who's in a very good job. I mean, she's in a great job, but it was like, what is your priority when you go to work? Is your priority, what if your priority was joy and ease and gratitude and effortlessness? Like, what if you brought that quality of, I'm going to prioritize doing this effortlessly and joyfully and gratefully, and what would that do to the relationships you were having, that the interactions you were having, and that reframe actually helps everybody else, and you get to step out of your day-to-day stress and misery. And is that who's putting that stress on you, or is it actually mind created? Is it come from you? And when we were digging in, it was like, oh, there's actually not somebody out here who's pressuring me. It's actually coming from me, was the insight.
Yeah, I have to agree. For me, I think it's 100%. No one's following me around telling me I'm doing a terrible job. I mean, most of the time, people will just give me my space, that tends to be what happens. So yeah, it's
Right.
all sort of,
Like, why do we do that? I mean, it's a curious question, right? Because when I had a job that I went to every day, I did the same thing. I don't anymore because I've totally shifted my reframe. But I, why do we do that to ourselves? You know?
yeah. I don't know. I mean, for me, I think it's fear. I don't know where it's coming from, but um, it's just yeah, it's just complicated. Maybe it's like because for me, going to work a lot of times, again, it's a fight or flight kicking in,
Mhm.
uh, and to some degree, it's not terrible because I feel more alert, and if it's not too much, it feels pretty good. It's not like all bad stress, but I kind of get locked into that drive, like that fight drive, and just not take breaks, like not settle down, not just be lazy, you know, just what's wrong with being lazy for a few minutes? You know, it's not the end of the world, you know.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that. It's just
Yeah.
you're saying this. It just and I had, you know, I've had like really good help over the years. And when I was in LA, I had a great. I've had always had great counselors, um, and I have, you know, and I still do. And I had one in LA, and she was always like, you just need to shift your perspective. You know, she was telling me that all the time, and it's a hard thing to contextualize. You know,
Right.
it's you can tell someone that you can't, but you can't give it to them. You know what I mean? It's like something we kind of have to figure out, sort of find for ourselves a little bit, I think.
I actually think it can be taught. I mean, this awareness work that I've been doing with Stephen Altair and Constantine and number of others. We're about to launch Conscious Accelerator. I actually think it very much can be taught. I now, you know, kind of on the other side,
Yeah.
that is actually living from this state of so-called ordinary mind. It's living in this mind created kind of thinking space here. And that when we can learn to step out of that and live from heart space, in kind of present moment awareness of what is, that we have the full capacity to work, but it's like working in flow. It's living and working in this state of awareness where you're not getting sucked into the movie, but you're maintaining a sense of present well-being that doesn't lose sight of that. And it's that kind of living in your thinking mind created story that creates the stress that then creates the cascade for all of the things that you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that whole stress response, and
Mhm.
it just
Mhm.
doesn't slow down. Yeah.
That's my that's my personal experience, and a lot of where I'm putting my effort now in terms of you know, what's coming on the horizon, workshops and things that I'm working on.
I mean,
Yeah.
that it sounds like, you know, it could be a really breakthrough, you know, like it's really, really useful for a lot of people.
That's
Yeah.
the hope. That's the hope. I really believe that living joyfully and effortlessly in a very busy job is, it's absolutely the goal. Yeah. Well, I'm aware that it's 6 o'clock. We kind of this conversation took a different turn than I expected. I don't know what else, you know, just kind of being mindful of time, but and your expertise, is there anything else that feels important that you'd really like to share in this bit of time that we have?
You know, I mean, we covered so much. You know, I just think it's great what you're doing, and I think there's a lot of big things to come. You know, for me, I feel like I got a long way. I still have there's always a long way to go, and that's not a bad thing. But yeah, I just think it's important, like like what you're saying, like don't fall into those stories that the mind is telling us, because you know, it's always telling us to stop, or it's always telling us to slow down, and you know, and that those are good things, but not out of fear, not out of, you know,
Right.
or doubt. Those aren't good reasons to stop, you know.
Yeah. Right. I actually think it's falling back into love.
Mm. Unhacking.
It
Right.
isn't, yes, unhacking. I love it. Unhacking, the new thing. Yeah. Yeah, because it's actually the simplicity of finding the peace and happiness of your own heart and then living from there,
Mm.
which is not complicated, which doesn't actually require any tools or techniques, or I mean, it requires techniques of learning that, but it doesn't require an instrument. It doesn't actually require a device. Those devices, you know, as we talked about, as you asked, what's biohacking for them? Well, yeah, I think there's some things that you can do in fine tuning, tapping into consciousness, that they can be fun and useful for, but they don't help you fall back into love. No, no. That's the work of your heart and awareness.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, I just, like I said, this conversation took a bit of a different turn, but I really loved hearing your story and talking to you. And I hope that other people got some value out of this as well. And, you know, your device is really cool, and you're super just inspired by you and your courage and your story. So thank you for coming on and sharing it, Tyson.
Of course. Thanks, Holly. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for, continuing to do what you're doing and what your team is doing. It's just been amazing. So,
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And just blessings and love to everybody who's been watching. And thank you all for keeping the community vibrant and alive. And like I said, we've got some workshops and things that we're cooking up that we'll be making available. And yeah, and I think Michael Smith's going to be on next week to talk about a little bit more about HRV and his work. So there'll be a little deep dive into that, which will be kind of fun. He wants to talk about HRV numbers. So we're going to go back to geeky HRV number world.
that's right up my alley.
Yeah. I think you'll like it. So, all right. Well wishes, everybody. Have a beautiful weekend wherever you are in the world. Love to you all.